The will to suffer. If you truly question life, one thing becomes painfully clear. Most of it is suffering. You wake up, push through exhaustion, endure loneliness, pain, regret, and fear, all for a few fleeting moments of joy. Yet, despite this endless cycle of torment, you keep going. You don't stop. You can't stop. Arthur Schopenhauer believed this was because of a force greater than reason, a blind, relentless will that compels all living things to exist, even when life itself is unbearable. It is not rational. It is not kind. It simply is. You are dragged through existence by this will to live, unable to reject it, unable to escape. You believe you seek happiness, but happiness is not the goal. It is only a temporary relief from pain. You escape one suffering, and another takes its place. When you fulfill a desire, a new one emerges. Hunger, thirst, loss, aging. Life is built on cycles of endless need and suffering, with only brief pauses of contentment. Some philosophers argue that life is an accident, a biological machine that exists only to perpetuate itself. But if that's true, then what is the point? If you suffer for no reason, if you keep going just because your body forces you to, then is existence itself a kind of cosmic torture? Perhaps the most terrifying thought is this: if suffering is endless, if desire never ceases, if life never allows true peace, then maybe the greatest cruelty is that we are not allowed to stop. The failure of consciousness. You assume your thoughts belong to you, that your mind is a tool for understanding reality, a guiding force in your decisions. But what if consciousness is not a gift but a malfunction? Your brain did not evolve to find truth, it evolved to survive. Every thought you have, every decision you make is influenced by millions of years of biological programming designed to keep you alive, not to show you reality. Your emotions manipulate you, your memories deceive you, and your instincts override logic. You believe you are making choices, but experiments show that your brain decides before you are even aware of it. Your sense of free will is nothing more than an illusion, a story you tell yourself to justify actions that were never truly yours to begin with. But if your thoughts are not your own, then who or what is in control? Some philosophers suggest that consciousness is not a single entity, but a chaotic collection of competing impulses, fighting for dominance. What you think of as you is simply the winner of that internal battle, a temporary ruler over an unstable kingdom of desires, fears, and instincts. And if that's true, if you are not truly thinking, only reacting, then perhaps the mind is not a tool, but a prison, a place where you are trapped, endlessly justifying your own illusions. The meaningless persistence of life. The sun rises, you wake up, you go to work, talk to people, eat and sleep. Then you do it all again, and again, and again. Life persists, moving forward relentlessly, dragging you with it whether you want it to or not. The days blend together, the weeks become months, the months become years, and suddenly entire decades are behind you. You tell yourself you are moving towards something, a goal, a future, a purpose. But what if you aren't? Some philosophers argue that life is not a journey, it is just motion without meaning. Albert Camus called this the absurd, the realization that we are creatures searching for meaning in a universe that offers none. You chase purpose, but the universe is indifferent. You long for significance, but time will erase everything you are. You can distract yourself with work, love, ambition, but in the end, all roads lead to the same place. The body decays. The memories fade. The story ends, and when it does, the universe does not care. The question is, why do you keep going? Is it hope, habit, fear, or is it simply because the alternative, stopping, is something your mind refuses to comprehend? The horror of self-awareness. A dog does not contemplate its purpose. A tree does not feel despair. But humans are different. We do not simply exist. We are aware that we exist. And that awareness comes with a terrifying burden. You look in the mirror and you see a stranger who is supposed to be you. You remember your past, but who you were feels distant, almost like a different person. Your mind tells you that you are yourself. But what does that even mean? Philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre argued that human existence is a curse because we are caught between two states. We are objects in the world, but we also have the ability to observe and question that world, including ourselves. This creates an endless spiral of doubt. If you can observe yourself, then who is the observer? If you can question your identity, then is there even a stable you at all? Some call this the burden of self-consciousness, the idea that human beings are trapped in an endless loop of questioning, never able to find true peace. You seek meaning, but meaning is not given. You search for a self, but the self keeps shifting. And the worst part? There is no way out. To be alive is to be aware of the abyss, to feel the weight of your own existence pressing down on you at all times. And no matter how much you distract yourself, no matter how much you try to drown it out, there will always be moments where you feel it. The terror of knowing that you are and not knowing why. The illusion of inner peace. You long for peace, a life without stress, without suffering, without constant worry. You believe that if you just fix the right things, your job, your relationships, your mindset, you will finally feel at ease. But what if inner peace does not exist? No matter how much you meditate, how much you simplify your life, your mind never stops running. Even in moments of happiness, there is an underlying tension, an awareness that the feeling will fade, that new problems will arise, that something could go wrong at any moment. And even if you could silence all external chaos, there is one thing you will never escape: your own thoughts. Your mind keeps moving, questioning, regretting, hoping. You carry the weight of memories, the uncertainty of the future, the quiet fear that you are not enough. Some philosophers argue that the very act of seeking peace creates suffering, because the more you chase it, the more you realize it is always just out of reach. Maybe peace is not something you can achieve. Maybe it is just a mirage, forever leading you forward, but never letting you arrive. The fragility of sanity. You believe your mind is stable, that your thoughts, your perceptions, your reality itself are built on something solid. But sanity is not a fortress, it is a thin, cracking shell. One moment of trauma, one deep loss, one shift in perception, and everything you thought was stable can collapse. Your mind is a delicate construction built from memory, logic, and the expectations of the world around you. But all of those things are unstable. Memory is unreliable. Logic is shaped by the limits of perception. And reality? It is only real because your mind agrees that it is. People who lose their sanity do not know when it happens. They do not feel themselves slipping. One day, they wake up in a world that no longer makes sense, unable to recognize that they are the ones who have changed. You assume that you will always know what is real, but how can you be sure? What if right now your mind is already drifting away from reality? What if the way you see the world is already broken and you just haven't noticed yet? And what if by the time you do, it will be too late to come back? The death of the self. You assume that you are one person, a single, continuous being moving through life. But what if that's just a comforting illusion? Your body changes constantly. Your thoughts evolve. Your beliefs, your identity, even your name are things that can be altered, forgotten, or erased. If everything about you can change, then what part of you is truly you? Some philosophers argue that there is no real self, just a shifting collection of memories and experiences tied together by habit. What you think of as you is simply a narrative, a story the brain tells itself to create the illusion of continuity. But if there is no core, no unchanging identity, then that means you are already gone. The person who existed years ago is not the same person listening to these words now. The self you hold on to so desperately is something that has already died and been replaced again and again, endlessly. So the question is, if the self is already dead, then who is listening right now? The unraveling of thought. You assume your thoughts are connected, that your mind flows in a way that makes sense, that your reasoning is sound. But what if your thoughts are not as stable as you think? The human mind does not work in a straight line. It jumps, forgets, rearranges. Thoughts appear out of nowhere, seemingly disconnected from reality. Have you ever forgotten a word mid-sentence? Lost your train of thought in the middle of speaking? Have you ever felt a moment of complete mental silence where there was nothing at all? Your consciousness is not continuous. It is a flickering, a series of disconnected ideas strung together in a way that only feels whole. Some philosophers argue that what we think of as a stream of consciousness is actually a collection of fragments, constantly breaking apart and reforming. Now consider this: if your thoughts can disappear without warning, then how many have already been lost? How much of yourself has already unraveled without you even realizing? And if your mind is just a series of unstable, fading ideas, then how long until there is nothing left? The sickness of being. Life is not a choice. You did not ask to be born, yet you are forced to exist. And with existence comes suffering, pain, fear, aging, loss. This is what some philosophers call the sickness of being, the idea that life itself is a kind of disease, something that afflicts all conscious beings. To live is to decay. From the moment you are born, your body is dying. Every second your cells degrade, your memories fade, your time runs out. You tell yourself that life is about joy, about love, about purpose. But no matter what you achieve, no matter how much happiness you find, suffering is always waiting. You can distract yourself, but deep down, you are always moving toward an end. Some say the only cure for the sickness of being is death. But what if death is just another part of the disease? What if existence never truly stops? What if you are trapped in this cycle forever? And if life itself is an illness, then what does that make you? The weight of unlived lives. You had choices, different paths, different possibilities. A version of you could have taken a different job, fallen in love with someone else, lived in another city. An entire world of alternate lives could have existed, but they didn't. You can only live one life, yet in every moment you are haunted by the weight of the ones you didn't choose. The lives you never lived still exist in your mind as ghosts, specters of possibility that will never be real. This is called existential regret, the realization that no matter what you do, you will always leave behind other versions of yourself, forever unexplored. Even if you are happy with where you are now, there is still the lingering thought, what if things had been different? And worse, what if this is the wrong life? What if, among all the possibilities, you chose the worst one? You will never know. You can never go back. And as time moves forward, more and more paths close behind you forever. The collapse of identity. You believe you are a single, stable person, a unified self. But have you ever truly questioned what you are? Your identity is built on memory, but memory is flawed. It changes over time, reconstructing itself with each recollection. Your personality shifts as you age. Your beliefs evolve. Even your emotions contradict themselves. One day, you love something, the next, you don't. So if everything about you can change, then what remains? Philosophers like David Hume argued that there is no fixed self, only a bundle of perceptions that create the illusion of continuity. Your mind desperately holds on to a story of who you are, but in truth, you are constantly dissolving and reforming, moment by moment. Now consider this. If identity is an illusion, then what happens when it collapses? What happens when you no longer recognize yourself? When your thoughts feel like echoes of a stranger? When the you once knew is gone, and what remains is nothing but a collection of fading memories? Maybe the self was never real to begin with. Maybe all that exists is a mask that wears itself, endlessly shifting, endlessly breaking apart. The mind as a prison. You cannot escape yourself. No matter where you go, no matter how far you run, you are always inside your own mind. You might not realize it, but you are trapped. Every thought you have is shaped by your past, your biology, your emotions, things you did not choose. You can never leave your own perception, never truly step outside yourself. Every experience, every feeling, every belief you hold is filtered through a mind that cannot see beyond itself. This is what some philosophers call mental imprisonment, the realization that you will never know what it's like to exist as someone else. You are forever stuck inside your own consciousness, forced to experience life through a single, unchanging perspective. You can distract yourself. You can drown out your thoughts with noise, with work, with pleasure. But in the silence, or when you are alone, the truth creeps back in. There is no escape from yourself. You will always be watching, always thinking, always trapped. The eternal struggle for nothing. You wake up, you work, you chase goals, you fight through pain, through exhaustion, through fear. You tell yourself it's for something, that there is a reason to struggle. But what if there isn't? What if every effort, every sacrifice, every moment of suffering is for nothing? Philosophers like Albert Camus spoke of the absurd, the idea that human beings search for meaning in a universe that offers none. You work toward happiness, but happiness is fleeting. You seek success, but success is hollow. No matter what you achieve, it is never enough. The struggle never ends because there is nothing to win. And the worst part? Even if you stop fighting, even if you surrender, life does not stop moving forward. You are still dragged along, struggling for something that will never come. Maybe existence is nothing more than a cruel joke, a game where the rules are designed to keep you playing, but there is no way to win. The abyss of infinite doubt. You like to believe you know what is real, that your thoughts are reliable, that your senses give you an accurate picture of the world. But how can you be sure? Radical skepticism suggests that nothing can truly be known. Your senses deceive you, your mind misremembers, you trust your experiences, but what if they are fabricated? What if reality is not what it seems? This is the abyss of infinite doubt, the realization that no matter how much you question, no matter how deep you search, you will never find certainty. Every answer leads to more questions. Every belief can be challenged. You may think you know yourself, but how do you know you aren't just a collection of assumptions, illusions, and errors? What if you have been wrong about everything? What if you can never be right? And if certainty is impossible, then what separates knowledge from delusion? Maybe nothing. The tragedy of rationality. You like to believe that reason makes life better, that through logic we can understand the universe, solve our problems, and create meaning. But what if rationality is not a gift, but a curse? Unlike animals, you cannot just live, you must understand. You cannot just suffer, you must question why. You analyze pain instead of simply feeling it. You break apart meaning instead of accepting it. The more you think, the more complicated life becomes, the more you realize how little you control. Philosophers like Nietzsche warned of the danger of too much thinking. He saw reason not as a source of comfort, but as a force that destroys illusions, leaving us naked in a world without meaning. You think, therefore you suffer. And if that's true, then maybe ignorance truly is bliss. Maybe the greatest tragedy of rationality is that the more you understand, the harder it is to be happy. The curse of memory. You think of memory as a gift, a way to hold on to the past, to remember who you are. But what if memory is not a treasure, but a burden? Memories do not exist as they were. Every time you recall an event, your brain rewrites it. Details change, fade, or merge with new thoughts. The past you believe in is a reconstruction, shaped by your emotions, your regrets, your fears. And some memories never leave. Painful moments, lost opportunities, words you cannot take back, they haunt you. They do not simply disappear with time, they resurface, altered, distorted, sometimes worse than they were. You replay them, relive them, suffer them over and over, long after they should have faded. What if forgetting is impossible? What if the weight of the past is something you must carry forever? And if your memory is false, unstable, and constantly changing, then how much of your past is even real? If your memories define who you are, but they are nothing but illusions, then maybe you are nothing but an illusion too. The fear of never changing. You assume that life is about growth, about progress. You tell yourself that you are constantly evolving, becoming someone better, wiser, different. But what if you aren't? Studies show that most people remain shockingly similar over time. The same habits, the same weaknesses, the same fears. They persist, even when you try to change. You might alter small details, but deep down, you are the same person you have always been. Now imagine this. What if you are trapped in yourself forever? What if no matter what you do, no matter how much time passes, you will always return to the same patterns? The same self-destructive choices, the same anxieties and doubts. If this is true, then change is not real. Only the illusion of change exists. And the person you are now is the person you will always be. That means the version of you that exists today is all you will ever have. And that should terrify you. The dread of absolute certainty. You think uncertainty is frightening, not knowing the future, not understanding the universe, not having all the answers, it makes you anxious. But what if certainty is worse? Imagine knowing exactly how your life will unfold, knowing when you will succeed and when you will fail, knowing how you will die. Imagine if there was no mystery, no possibility, only a fixed, unchangeable path. The philosopher Nietzsche warned of the prison of certainty, the idea that once everything is known, nothing is interesting. If you could predict every experience, every reaction, every consequence, then life would be unbearable. You would wake up each day knowing exactly what would happen, going through the motions with no hope of surprise. What if, at some level, you already know how things will end? What if your future is written and your belief in free will is just a cruel illusion? Maybe ignorance is not a flaw. Maybe it is the only thing keeping you sane. The false promise of redemption. You believe in second chances, in making amends, in fixing mistakes, in finding peace after regret. But what if redemption is a lie? Some wounds cannot be healed. Some mistakes cannot be undone. The past does not care about your guilt. It does not offer you a way to erase what has been done. No matter how much you change, you can never escape the person you once were. And even if others forgive you, even if you forgive yourself, the past remains. You can rewrite your story, try to live differently, but the version of you who failed, who hurt others, who made mistakes, that version still existed. It does not disappear just because you want it to. Some philosophers argue that true redemption is impossible, that guilt is a debt you must carry for as long as you live, that no amount of good can erase the weight of your past actions. And if that's true, then maybe there is no such thing as moving on. Maybe there is only living with what you have done.
The failure of the soul.
You like to believe that deep down you are something more than flesh and bone. That beneath your thoughts, beneath your body, beneath all the things that change over time, there is a soul, something permanent, something untouched.
But what if there isn't?
The idea of the soul is comforting. It suggests that we are not just machines, that there is something eternal within us. But if the self is always changing, if your mind is just a collection of shifting thoughts, then what exactly is the soul supposed to be? Philosophers like Hume and Nietzsche argued that the soul is a human invention, a desperate attempt to give permanence to something that is constantly vanishing. If you were truly more than your body, more than your memories, then you would not need to struggle to define yourself. What if, when you die, there is no soul left to move on? What if you do not transcend, do not continue, do not become something greater, but simply stop? And if the soul was a lie, then what were you really? Maybe nothing at all.
The unreachable truth.
You assume that with enough effort, enough intelligence, enough searching, you can reach the truth. That the answers to life, the universe, and existence are out there, waiting to be found. But what if they aren't? What if the truth is something the human mind was never meant to grasp? Philosophers have long argued that reality is too vast, too complex, too alien for us to ever fully understand. Every explanation leads to more questions. Every discovery reveals a greater unknown. The deeper you search, the more the truth seems to shift, just out of reach, always incomplete, always unraveling.
And what if, beyond a certain point, the truth is so horrifying, so meaningless, so unbearable, that it would drive you to madness if you ever saw it? What if our ignorance is not a flaw but a mercy?
Maybe the reason we can never reach the truth is because we are not supposed to. The self as an illusion. You believe that you are one person, a single, continuous being. But what if you are not? Your memories shift, your thoughts change, your desires contradict themselves. You are not today who you were 5 years ago or even yesterday. So if everything about you is fluid, then what part of you is truly you? Buddhist philosophy and modern neuroscience suggest that the self is an illusion, a convenient narrative created by the brain to make sense of a chaotic stream of thoughts. The you that exists now is just a temporary structure, one that will dissolve and reform as time passes. But if the self is an illusion, then what happens when it disappears? What happens when you wake up one day and no longer recognize the person you have become?
And what if that has already happened? What if the you who started this life is already gone, and the only thing left is a stranger pretending to be you?
The nightmare of permanent existence. You fear death. You do not want your consciousness to end, to disappear into nothingness. But have you considered the other possibility? What if death never comes? What if you are trapped in existence forever? At first, it might seem comforting, eternal life, endless experiences, infinite time. But time is a slow, crushing force. You would watch everyone you love fade away, civilizations rise and fall, entire galaxies form and collapse. You would experience everything, see everything, learn everything, until there was nothing left. And still you would continue. Imagine existing when the universe has gone cold, when all the stars have burned out, when there is no light, no warmth, no movement, just you, alone in the void, with no way to end, no way to forget, no way to escape. Maybe death is not a punishment.
Maybe it is the only mercy we are given.
The horror of forgotten time. You remember pieces of your life, fragments, moments, scattered images. But what about the parts you have forgotten? Entire days, entire months, entire years, vanished, erased from your mind. You assume that those lost moments were insignificant, that forgetting is normal. But what if it isn't? What if forgetting is a kind of death? The person who lived those forgotten moments is gone, replaced by a version of you that no longer remembers. And if parts of your past can disappear, then how much of your life has already been lost? How many versions of yourself have died within you, leaving only shadows behind? And worse, if forgetting is so easy, so natural, then what stops it from taking everything?
What if one day you wake up and you are already gone?
The trap of infinite reflection. Look into a mirror and you see yourself, but what if you aren't really there? You define yourself based on how others see you, how you think, how you remember your past. But every one of those things is a reflection, a distorted image bouncing between perceptions, expectations, and memories. You are not a fixed being. You are a reflection of a reflection, endlessly repeating. The philosopher Jacques Lacan described the mirror stage, the moment in childhood when you recognize yourself in a reflection and begin to build an identity. But that identity is always incomplete, always based on something outside yourself. You chase after an image of who you think you are, but you never truly reach it. Now ask yourself, if you can only define yourself through reflections, if yourself is nothing more than a series of shifting images, then what happens if the mirror breaks? And what if, when all reflections disappear, there was never anything there to begin with? The absurdity of hope. You tell yourself that things will get better, that no matter how difficult life is, there is always something to look forward to. Hope keeps you going, but what if hope is just a trick of the mind? Philosophers like Albert Camus argued that hope is the greatest illusion of all, a way to distract ourselves from the crushing truth that life does not owe us anything. You believe that happiness is waiting for you just beyond the next milestone, the next achievement, but every time you reach what you were striving for, it is never enough. The satisfaction is temporary, the happiness fades, and you find yourself chasing something else over and over again. If this cycle never ends, then hope is not a solution, it is a trap. It keeps you running towards something that will always be just out of reach. What if there is nothing at the end of all your struggles? What if you are running toward nothing? And if that's true, then is hope really something to hold on to, or just another form of suffering? The crushing weight of responsibility. You are responsible for your actions, your choices, your life. You make decisions every day, shaping your future, defining who you are. But what if that responsibility is unbearable? Jean-Paul Sartre argued that absolute freedom comes with absolute responsibility, that every choice you make is entirely your own, with no excuses, no fate, no divine plan to blame. This means that everything wrong in your life is your fault. Every failure, every missed opportunity, every regret, it all rests on your shoulders alone. Worse yet, every choice you make excludes every other possibility. The life you could have lived, the person you could have become, all of it disappears the moment you choose one path over another. Every decision is a death sentence for 1,000 possibilities, and you are the one who must bear that weight.
You are free.
But that freedom might be the heaviest burden of all. The lie of free will. You believe you make choices. You believe that when you wake up, when you move, when you decide what to do next, you are in control. But what if you never had a choice at all? Neuroscience has found that decisions are made before you are aware of them. Your brain fires signals milliseconds before you decide to act, meaning the feeling of making a choice is just an illusion. You are not a conscious actor. You are a machine reacting to stimuli, a biological program running its course. Philosophers like Arthur Schopenhauer argued that man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. You can choose between coffee or tea, but you cannot choose the desires, thoughts, and impulses that drive that decision. Everything you are, the way you think, the way you act, was shaped by genetics, environment, and history. You were never in control. If free will is an illusion, then what does it mean to live? Are you simply watching your life unfold, a spectator to a story that was written before you were even born? The collapse of moral order. You believe in right and wrong, that certain things are good and certain things are evil, that justice exists, but morality is not universal. It is a human invention. Nietzsche warned of the collapse of moral order, the moment when societies realize that their rules are built on nothing but tradition, fear, and power. Every civilization that has ever existed has had different definitions of good and evil. What was once sacred is now immoral. What was once evil is now normal. So what happens when morality itself falls apart? If there is no universal truth, then nothing is objectively right or wrong. And if nothing is right or wrong, then what is stopping us from doing anything? What if the only thing keeping society together is a collective illusion? And what happens when people stop believing in it? Maybe the only true morality is power. Maybe the only real rule is whoever can enforce their will upon the world.
The incompleteness of being.
You tell yourself that you are whole, that you are one person, complete and self-contained. But deep down, you feel it, that something is missing. No matter how much you achieve, no matter how much you love, no matter how much you grow, you never feel complete. There is always something just out of reach, an undefined absence, a feeling that you are somehow not enough. Philosophers like Heidegger and Sartre argued that human existence is defined by its own incompleteness, that we are constantly in search of something, but we do not even know what that something is. You chase fulfillment, but every time you grasp it, it slips away, revealing a deeper emptiness. And what if this feeling never ends? What if you will spend your entire life searching for wholeness, only to die before you ever find it? Maybe the greatest tragedy of existence is not that it ends, but that it was never complete to begin with. The agony of cosmic indifference. You like to believe that your life matters, that your struggles, your joys, your existence mean something in the grand scheme of things. But the universe does not care. You are one of billions living on a tiny rock, orbiting a minor star, in an insignificant galaxy, lost in an ocean of endless space. Nothing you do changes the trajectory of the cosmos. The universe has existed for billions of years before you, and it will exist for billions after. If you were to disappear right now, nothing would be different. Philosophers like Camus and Lovecraft understood this horror, the realization that no matter how much we struggle, no matter how much we suffer, the universe remains indifferent. There is no grand destiny, no guiding force, no cosmic justice. And if that's true, then why do you keep fighting? If nothing you do matters, then what is stopping you from collapsing into despair? Or worse, what if the only reason you keep going is because your mind refuses to accept the truth? The tyranny of the present moment. You exist only right now. The past is a memory. The future is unknown. You are trapped in the present moment, and you cannot leave it. This should be comforting, but the present is relentless. It does not stop, does not wait. Every second that passes is another version of you, erased. The future never arrives. It only transforms into more of the present, an endless stream of moments that you are forced to endure, one after another. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard called this the sickness of time, the realization that we are stuck, always waiting for something that never comes. You think the next day will be different, but it will only be another version of now. You long for the past, but it has already been swallowed. And the worst part, no matter how much you try to escape, through distraction, through hope, through dreams, the present moment always drags you back in. There is no way out. The problem of other selves. You assume that the people around you think and feel like you do, that they have minds, emotions, experiences that are just as rich as your own. But how do you know? You cannot see inside another person's mind. You cannot confirm that they think, that they feel, that they even truly exist beyond their surface actions. The philosopher David Chalmers called this the hard problem of consciousness, the unsettling fact that you can never know if other minds are real. Imagine for a moment that everyone around you is just imitating consciousness. They laugh, they cry, they respond, but it is all just reflex, like a machine programmed to mimic human behavior. If that were true, how would you know? What if you are the only true mind in existence? What if the world around you is nothing more than an elaborate illusion filled with empty shells acting as if they are real? And if that's true, then you are truly alone, the incoherence of reality. You trust your senses. You assume that what you see, what you hear, what you touch is real. But what if it isn't? Reality is not as stable as it seems. Optical illusions trick your eyes. Memories are rewritten. Your brain filters and distorts everything you experience. You assume the world is solid, but science tells us that matter is mostly empty space. You assume time flows forward, but physics suggests that past, present, and future may all exist at once. The philosopher Immanuel Kant argued that we do not perceive reality as it truly is, only a version of it, shaped by the limitations of our minds. If that's true, then what you call reality is just a mental construct, a projection created by your brain. And if reality is just a projection, then how can you be sure any of this is real at all? Maybe the world is not incoherent. Maybe you are. The death of experience. You assume that life is made up of unique moments, that each day brings something new. But look closely. How much of what you do truly feels different? You wake up in the same bed, walk the same streets, eat the same food, have the same conversations. Days blur together, experiences repeat, time moves forward, but nothing ever really changes. Philosophers call this experiential entropy, the slow decay of novelty, the process by which life becomes a series of repetitions. The first time you experience something, it is vivid. The second time, less so. Eventually, everything feels familiar, dull, routine. Now imagine reaching a point where nothing feels new at all, where every moment is just a faded copy of the one before it, where you are not really living, but merely remembering what life used to feel like. And if that happens, if experience itself dies, then what is left? Are you even alive or just watching yourself exist? The horror of knowing too much. You believe that knowledge is power, that the more you understand, the better off you will be. But what if the truth is something you were never meant to grasp? Your mind is not built for absolute knowledge. You see only a fraction of reality, filtered and softened so that you can survive. But what if those filters were removed? What if you saw everything? Every hidden pattern, every forgotten history, every lie that keeps society functioning. Some philosophers argue that true knowledge is a burden, not a gift. The more you know, the more you realize how small and helpless you are. You discover that your actions mean nothing, that the universe is indifferent, that free will is an illusion, that morality is a construct. And then the most terrifying realization: there is no final answer, no ultimate truth, just layers upon layers of deeper questions stretching endlessly until you can no longer tell what is real. Maybe ignorance is not a weakness.
Maybe it is the only thing keeping you sane.
The death of the divine. For centuries, humanity believed in gods. Divine beings who created us, watched over us, gave meaning to our suffering. But what happens when the gods are gone? Nietzsche declared that God is dead, not because a deity literally died, but because modern society had outgrown belief in the divine. Without religion, without an ultimate authority, humanity was left alone, staring into the void. Without God, there is no absolute morality, no higher purpose, no cosmic justice, no guarantee that good will be rewarded or evil punished. Every belief system that once held society together begins to crumble. And in its place? Nothing. The universe does not love you. It does not care what happens to you. If the divine is truly dead, then you are utterly alone in an empty cosmos. And if that is true, then why do you keep pretending otherwise?
The disappearance of meaning.
You assume that life has meaning, that even if it isn't handed to you, you can at least create your own purpose. But what if meaning itself is a mirage? Jean-Paul Sartre argued that existence is inherently meaningless. We try to impose meaning through love, through work, through beliefs, but none of it is real. It is all just a distraction from the void. You chase fulfillment, but fulfillment does not last. You tell yourself that life has value, but value is a human invention. When you die, when the people who remember you die, when the earth itself is gone, what will be left? If meaning is something that can disappear, then was it ever real to begin with? Or is life just a story we tell ourselves to avoid seeing the truth? The self-devouring mind. Your mind is a powerful tool. It is how you solve problems, make decisions, understand the world. But what if your mind is also your greatest enemy? You do not control your thoughts. They arrive unbidden, interrupting your peace, filling you with fear, doubt, and regret. You try to silence them, but the more you fight, the stronger they become. The very act of thinking feeds the thoughts that torment you. Philosophers and psychologists have described this as the self-devouring mind, the tendency of consciousness to consume itself, to spiral into endless loops of questioning, analyzing, doubting. You try to make sense of your own existence, but the more you think, the deeper you sink. And if your mind is capable of destroying itself, then what if the only way to escape
Is to stop thinking altogether?
the fragility of trust? You trust people, your friends, your family, the ones closest to you. You assume they will tell you the truth, that they will stand by you. But what if they don't? Trust is not built on certainty. It is built on faith. You can never truly know what someone is thinking, what they are hiding, what they are capable of. You assume that the people around you are who they claim to be, but what if they are not?
What if someone has already betrayed you and you just haven't discovered it yet? What if the people you love are wearing masks, showing you only the version of themselves they want you to see? And what if one day you realize that you never really knew them at all?
The horror of thought loops. You assume that your mind moves forward, that your thoughts have direction. But have you ever noticed a thought getting stuck? You try to solve a problem, but your mind keeps circling the same answer. You try to move on from a memory, but it plays over and over again. You try to escape a feeling, but it drags you back in. This is the horror of thought loops, the realization that your mind is not always under your control. It can trap you, force you to relive the same worries, the same fears, the same self-doubt with no way out. You think you are making progress, but you are only running in circles. Some philosophers argue that consciousness itself is a loop, a process of self-referencing thoughts that never truly lead anywhere. If that's true, then what if you have already had this exact thought before? What if you are stuck inside a mental cycle, endlessly repeating, unable to break free? And what if your entire life is just one long, unending loop, one you have already lived countless times before? The problem of infinite regression. You seek answers. You want to know why things happen, why the universe exists, why you are here, but every answer leads to another question. The philosopher Aristotle warned of infinite regression, the idea that if every explanation requires another explanation, then we can never find a final truth. You ask, why does the universe exist? The answer leads to another why, and another, spiraling endlessly. If every cause needs a cause, then where does it end? If every belief needs justification, then how can you ever be certain of anything? Maybe the reason we never find the truth is because there is no final answer. Maybe every explanation, every theory, every belief is just another step in an endless chain of illusions. And maybe, the deeper you search, the more you will realize that there is nothing at the bottom, the slow erasure of identity. You assume that you are one person, that your identity is something stable, but identity is not fixed. It fades slowly without you even noticing. Think back to who you were 10 years ago. Would that person recognize you now? Would they understand your choices, your thoughts, your beliefs? If not, then who are you really? The person you were, or the person you are now? Every day, small pieces of your identity disappear. You forget things you once loved. You lose connections with people who once defined you. You change your opinions, your habits, your desires. One day you may wake up and realize that nothing of your past self remains. And if identity can be erased so easily, then was it ever real to begin with? Or are you nothing more than a temporary collection of memories, dissolving one thought at a time? The fading relevance of truth. You like to believe that truth matters, that facts are important, that knowledge has value, but what if truth is meaningless? Truth only matters if people believe in it. But the world does not run on truth. It runs on perception, emotion, and power. People do not seek what is true. They seek what is useful, what is comforting, what allows them to survive. Over time, truth is reshaped, rewritten, buried beneath lies that are more convenient. And when no one remembers the truth, does it still exist? Some philosophers argue that reality itself is shaped by consensus. If enough people believe something false, it becomes the new truth. And if truth can be rewritten, if it can be erased, then was it ever truly objective? Maybe truth is not fading. Maybe it was never there to begin with. The self as a recursive nightmare. You assume that your mind controls your thoughts, but what if your mind is your thoughts? The philosopher Douglas Hofstadter described consciousness as a strange loop, a system that defines itself by referencing itself. You think you are an observer of your own mind, but what if the observer is just another thought trapped inside a self-referential cycle? If that is true, then your identity is not a stable thing. It is a loop endlessly feeding into itself. You think, you reflect on your thoughts, you analyze your reflection, and the cycle repeats. Now ask yourself, who is thinking this thought? If the self is just a recursive system, then there is no true core, no stable you at the center. There is only the process of thinking itself, looping endlessly with no way out. And if there is no real self, then who or what is listening to these words right now? The terror of the doppelganger. You think you are unique, that no one else could possibly be you. But what if there was another? The idea of the doppelganger, a perfect double of yourself, has haunted humanity for centuries. In folklore, seeing your double is an omen of death. In philosophy, it is a challenge to your very existence. If another version of you existed exactly the same in every way, then which one of you is real? Imagine walking down the street and seeing yourself staring back at you. They have your face, your memories, your thoughts. They smile, but something is off. Their eyes linger too long. They move in ways you don't expect. And then they speak, not in your voice, but with your words, stolen before you can say them. Philosophers like Nietzsche and Kierkegaard saw the doppelganger as a representation of existential terror, the realization that you are not as singular as you believe. If you can be copied, then what makes you you? If your identity can be replicated, then are you even real to begin with? And worse, what if the doppelganger is the real one and you are the copy? What if you are the version meant to disappear? Would you even know? The mind that can't stop thinking. Right now, you are thinking. You are always thinking. Even when you sleep, your mind keeps running, playing out dreams, reshaping memories, whispering in the background of your consciousness. You have never experienced true silence. For most, this is normal. But what happens when your mind turns against you? What happens when the thoughts won't stop, when they become a storm, a relentless flood of noise? What happens when thinking itself becomes a prison? Some philosophers and neuroscientists argue that consciousness is an illness, an endless self-referential feedback loop that cannot stop looking at itself. You analyze your actions, then analyze your analysis, then question the questioning, spiraling deeper and deeper until there is no escape. People drown in their own thoughts. They replay past mistakes, predict future disasters, question every decision. Their minds become a torture chamber filled with echoes that never end. The more they try to quiet it, the louder it becomes. And what if this is the default state of consciousness? What if the mind was never meant to stop thinking? What if your own thoughts will be the thing that finally destroys you? The unnoticed death of the world. You assume that the world is still here, that the places you know, the people you love, still exist even when you are not looking. But how do you know? The philosopher George Berkeley once argued that reality is dependent on perception. If no one is observing something, does it still exist? What if the world is only real when you are looking at it? Now imagine this. What if entire places, entire cities, entire civilizations have disappeared without anyone noticing? If no one is there to witness it, how would we ever know? Perhaps even now, parts of reality are quietly collapsing, dissolving into nothingness, leaving behind only the illusion that they were ever there. Consider this. If you were the last person alive, would the world still exist? If no one is left to confirm reality, does it continue, or does it die with the final observer? Maybe right now things are disappearing. Maybe, without realizing it, you are witnessing the slow, unnoticed death of everything. Maybe, in some way, it's already gone. The grand illusion of progress. You believe in progress, that humanity is moving forward, that society is evolving, that things are getting better. But what if that is just a comforting illusion? Civilizations rise and fall, empires collapse, great thinkers, great artists, great discoveries all eventually fade into dust. We tell ourselves that technology, science, and culture are pushing us towards something greater. But greater than what? Progress implies direction, but what is the destination? History suggests that progress is not a straight line, it is a cycle. A civilization advances only to destroy itself. An idea flourishes only to be forgotten. The lessons of the past are lost, forcing us to repeat them. Nietzsche called this the eternal recurrence, the idea that history loops endlessly, repeating itself in slightly different forms forever. If that is true, then progress does not exist, only variation in an endless pattern. And if progress is an illusion, then what are we really working toward? What if there is no future, no destiny, no final point of achievement? What if we are just running in circles, pretending we are moving forward? The absolute finality of death. You assume there is something after death, a continuation, a soul, a legacy, a memory. But what if there isn't? What if death is not just the end of your body, but the end of everything? You will not watch your funeral. You will not hear people speak your name. You will not float in the void or see the universe from the outside. You will not even know that you are dead. One moment, you are alive. The next, you are gone. Philosophers like Epicurus argued that we should not fear death because where we are, death is not. Where death is, we are not. But what if it is not that simple? What if nothingness itself is a horror? Not because it is painful, but because it is beyond comprehension.
You cannot imagine non-existence because to imagine anything is to be alive. The very attempt to picture death is proof that you are still here. But one day, you won't be. And when that happens, the world will go on without you, as if you had never been here at all. No memories, no echoes, just silence. And you will never even know that you are missing.
The comfort of the lie. You tell yourself you want the truth. That reality, no matter how harsh, is better than illusion. But deep down, you know that isn't true. The world is full of lies, small ones, grand ones, the ones you tell yourself just to get through the day. You believe in justice, even when the world is unfair. You believe in meaning, even when none exists. You believe in love, even when it fades. These lies keep you functioning, keep you from staring too long into the abyss. Philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche warned that truth is not always useful, that humanity survives because of its illusions, not in spite of them. If you strip away the comforting falsehoods, if you look at the universe as it truly is, what do you see? A cold, empty cosmos, a history of suffering, the certainty of death.
What if the only way to live is to pretend? Maybe the lies are not a flaw.
Maybe they are the only thing keeping you from collapsing under the weight of reality.
The dread of unconscious control.
You believe you are in control, that you think, decide, and act with intention. But what if you are not? Your heart beats without your permission. Your lungs breathe without your consent. Even your thoughts arise on their own, unbidden. Have you ever had an intrusive thought, a violent impulse, a sudden desire you could not explain? Who or what is generating these thoughts? Neuroscientists have discovered that the brain decides before you do, that your consciousness is simply watching choices that have already been made. You do not control your impulses, you only react to them, justifying them after the fact, convincing yourself that they were yours all along. If that is true, then who is really in charge? What if your mind is not truly yours? What if you are merely the illusion of control, helplessly following commands you do not understand? The prison of the flesh. You are trapped. You cannot leave your body. You cannot separate yourself from your senses, from your pain, from the slow decay of time. You live inside a biological cage of meat, bone, and nerves, forced to experience whatever the body demands: hunger, exhaustion, suffering. No matter how much you learn, how much you think, how much you dream, you are always pulled back by flesh. You get sick, you grow old, you feel pain, and one day it will overwhelm you completely. Philosophers have called this the human condition, the knowledge that you are more than a body, yet completely bound by it. You want to be free, but you are made of chains. You can imagine eternity, but you cannot escape the reality of your own rotting form. You tell yourself that your mind is what matters, but one day your body will fail. And when it does, your mind will go with it, because no matter how much you fight it, you are your body's prisoner. The spectre of forgotten gods. Once, the world was filled with gods. Before science, before logic, before modernity, there were deities in everything, in the trees, in the rivers, in the sky. People believed in spirits, in curses, in unseen forces shaping the world. They built temples, performed rituals, sacrificed in their names. And then, one by one, the gods died, not in fire, not in war, but in something far worse: forgetfulness. Who mourns the gods of the ancient world? Who still prays to them, remembers their names? Once, they ruled over mankind, and now they are nothing. But what if gods do not disappear when they are forgotten? What if they linger, unseen, waiting in the shadows of abandoned temples and empty altars, their hunger growing, their patience running out? What if they want to be remembered again? What if they are whispering into the minds of the desperate, the lonely, the insane, waiting for someone to bring them back? And what if some gods do not forgive being abandoned?
The inescapability of regret.
You cannot change the past. That is a simple truth, but one that grows heavier with time. Every mistake, every missed opportunity, every wrong word spoken, they cannot be undone. Regret is one of the only emotions that does not fade. It lingers, resurfacing in quiet moments, reminding you of the other versions of yourself that could have existed. Every choice you made eliminated another possibility, another life you could have lived. Some philosophers argue that regret is proof of free will, that you had the power to choose, and now you suffer for it. Others argue the opposite, that regret is an illusion because your choices were always predetermined. Either way, it does not matter.
The past is a graveyard of unchangeable mistakes, and you are forced to live among the ghosts of what might have been. Even if you try to move forward, regret does not let go. It waits in the silence. It waits in the stillness.
It waits for the moment you finally look back. The machine that feeds on suffering. Something out there is feeding. It does not eat flesh. It does not drink blood. It does not consume in the way you understand. But it is there, watching, waiting, growing. Philosophers and mystics have long speculated that suffering is not a meaningless byproduct of existence, but a resource, that pain, fear, and despair are not just emotions, but something harvested. Some believe it is a cosmic force, an entity or a system designed to generate and collect suffering. Others see it as a machine, a self-sustaining cycle where suffering is the fuel that keeps the world turning. Think about it. Why does suffering persist? Why does every attempt to eliminate it fail? Why, no matter how much we progress, does the weight of pain never lessen? Maybe suffering is not a flaw in the system.
Maybe it is the system?
And maybe the thing that feeds on it is already inside you, inside all of us, ensuring that the cycle never stops. The tyranny of consciousness. You did not ask to be aware. You did not choose to experience time, pain, or the slow decay of everything you love. Yet, here you are, trapped inside your own mind, forced to witness every moment, every thought, every fear. Philosophers like Sartre and Camus called this the burden of existence, the crushing weight of knowing that you are alive, that you will die, and that you cannot escape the endless, inescapable awareness of yourself. Other creatures do not suffer this way. A deer does not contemplate its mortality. A fish does not regret its past. But you? You are cursed to think, to reflect, to worry, to understand just enough to know that nothing will ever make sense. And even when you sleep, your mind does not let you rest. Dreams pull you back, forcing you to experience realities that do not exist. There is no way to turn it off, no way to silence it. You exist in a prison where your own consciousness is the warden. And the worst part? You would rather endure this than experience the alternative. Not existing at all.
The absurdity of self-preservation. You fight to stay alive, you avoid pain, you eat, you drink, you breathe, all to keep yourself functioning.
But for what?
No matter what you do, no matter how carefully you protect yourself, death is guaranteed. Every second you struggle to survive is simply another moment spent delaying the inevitable. No matter how much you run, no matter how much you fight, you will lose in the end.
Philosophers like Camus describe this as the absurdity of existence, the contradiction of fighting for something that must, by definition, end. Why do we cling to life so desperately when life itself offers no guarantee of meaning, happiness, or satisfaction? Some people say they live for love, for pleasure, for purpose. But what happens when those things fade? What happens when time erases everything you have built? The universe will not remember your name. History will move on without you. And still you will fight, because even when you know the battle is hopeless, even when you understand that survival has no final reward, something inside you refuses to stop. Maybe the joke isn't that we die, maybe the joke is that we fight so hard to avoid it. The loneliness of intelligence. The more you understand, the more alone you become. Most people do not think deeply. They live in routines, distractions, simple pleasures. But intelligence comes with a cost, the realization that no one else sees the world quite as you do. Philosophers have called this intellectual isolation, the sense that the more you learn, the harder it is to connect with others. Ideas that seem obvious to you are incomprehensible to those around you. You see patterns they do not. You ask questions they never consider. You begin to feel like a visitor in your own world. And the higher intelligence climbs, the lonelier it becomes. The great thinkers, the visionaries, the minds that changed the world, they were not celebrated in their time. They were outcasts, ridiculed, misunderstood. Now imagine a mind so advanced, so far beyond human understanding, that it has no equal, no one to talk to, no one who can comprehend it? What if that mind is already here? What if something vast, something unknowable, is trapped in a prison of intelligence, screaming into a void where no one can hear it?
And what if one day you become smart enough to understand its pain?
The horror of perfect knowledge. You believe that knowledge is good, that to understand everything, to have complete awareness, would be the ultimate power. But what if it is the ultimate curse? There is a reason we do not know everything. Our minds are limited, not because we lack intelligence, but because we are not meant to comprehend the full scope of reality. Imagine knowing exactly how you will die, knowing how every choice you make will end, knowing that free will is an illusion, that every event in the universe is preordained, that nothing you do will ever change the outcome. Imagine seeing through every lie, every illusion, every comforting belief that makes life bearable. Imagine understanding suffering completely, knowing why it happens, knowing that it cannot be stopped, knowing that no one will ever be saved. What if there are truths so unbearable that the only way to survive them is not to know? And what if something, some force, some intelligence already possesses this knowledge? What if it is trapped, screaming silently in the vastness of the cosmos, unable to forget what it has seen? And what if one day it decides that you should know too? The death of the witness. You believe that when something happens it is real, that events exist because they occurred, because they left behind evidence, because history remembers them.
But what happens when the last witness dies?
Every moment of your life, every thought, every secret joy, every unspeakable fear, they exist only because you remember them. When you die, every personal story, every experience that was never shared, vanishes forever. Think about this. There were civilizations before ours whose names we will never know. People who lived full, complex lives, loved and suffered, and then disappeared completely. No records, no graves, not even a whisper in time. If a moment is never seen, never spoken of, never recorded, did it ever truly exist? If history is just the story of what was written down, then how much of reality has already been erased? One day, no one will remember your name. No one will recall your voice, your face, the things you loved. And when the last person who ever thought of you is gone,
It will be as if you were never here at all.
the veil of perception. You assume that what you see is real, that your senses give you a true picture of the world. But what if they don't? Philosophers like Immanuel Kant argued that we do not experience reality itself, only a version of it shaped by the limitations of our minds. Your eyes can only see a fraction of the light spectrum. Your ears detect only a narrow range of sound. Your brain filters and alters what you perceive, filling in gaps, reshaping memories, twisting reality to fit expectations. What if you are only seeing a shadow of the truth? Now consider this. If your perception is all you have, and if perception is unreliable, then how can you ever be sure that what you call reality is real at all? Maybe you are not perceiving the world as it is. Maybe you are perceiving the version your mind allows you to see. And maybe, just beyond your perception, something else is watching you, the silent collapse of reality. You expect reality to be stable, that the world will be the same tomorrow as it is today. But what if it isn't? Some philosophers and physicists have theorized that existence itself is fragile, that the laws of reality, gravity, time, causality, are not fundamental but temporary. What if reality is not a solid structure, but a failing system slowly unraveling without anyone noticing? Think about déjà vu, glitches in memory, sudden feelings of wrongness, as if something has changed but you can't explain how. What if these moments are not mistakes but signs of something breaking? What if reality is collapsing in pieces and we are simply too limited to perceive it happening? And what if one day you wake up and the world is not quite the same as you remember? Because it isn't. The myth of justice. You believe in fairness, that good is rewarded and evil is punished, that people get what they deserve,
But history says otherwise.
In the real world, justice is not a law of nature. It is a human invention, an attempt to impose order on chaos. People suffer for no reason. Criminals walk free. The innocent are destroyed, forgotten, erased. The strong dictate what is just, and the weak are left to suffer in silence. Nietzsche warned that justice was a myth used to control the powerless, a lie we tell ourselves to justify cruelty. The universe does not care if you are good or evil. The universe does not care at all. You want to believe that justice exists, that balance will be restored, that the pain you have endured will somehow be made right. But what if the truth is worse? What if the suffering you have endured was never meant to be avenged? What if there is no justice, and there never was? The futility of desire. You are always wanting, always chasing something, a new goal, a new experience, a new love, but desire never ends. Buddhist philosophy calls this the cycle of craving, the endless loop of wanting, achieving, and then wanting something more. No matter how much you gain, it is never enough. You satisfy one hunger only for another to take its place. Think about something you desperately wanted in the past, a thing you dreamed about, longed for, believed would change your life. Now that you have it, does it feel the same? Or has the feeling faded, replaced by a new craving? Philosophers like Schopenhauer believed that desire is suffering, that we do not chase happiness, but only temporary relief from wanting. The moment you achieve something, its meaning begins to decay. If desire can never truly be satisfied, then what is the point? What if the thing you are searching for does not exist? And what if the worst part of human nature is that, even if you knew that, you would still keep searching? The guilt of existence. You did not ask to be born. You did not choose to exist. Yet here you are, taking up space, consuming resources, leaving a trail of destruction in your wake. Every breath you take, every meal you eat, every action you perform, something suffers because of it. You step on insects without noticing. You contribute to systems that exploit and destroy. You eat knowing something had to die to sustain you. Every comfort you enjoy exists because something else was denied. Philosophers like Emile Cioran spoke of existential guilt, the quiet, crushing realization that simply by existing, you cause suffering, that life itself is an act of harm. Even if you dedicate yourself to doing good, you cannot erase the fundamental cost of your presence. Now consider this. If the world would continue without you, if nothing truly depends on you, then what justifies your existence? What gives you the right to be here, to take and take and take, knowing you can never truly give back enough to balance the scales? What if existence itself is a sin, one that you can never atone for? And what if the only way to make things right
Is to disappear?
the failure of human connection? You believe that you know the people around you, that you understand them, that they understand you. But what if you don't? You can never truly step into another person's mind. You can never see the world through their eyes, feel their emotions as they do. Every word they say is an approximation, every action an interpretation. You assume that your relationships are built on mutual understanding, but how much do you actually know? Even those closest to you, your friends, your family, your lovers, are ultimately strangers. They have thoughts they never share, experiences you will never comprehend. The love you feel for them is based not on who they are, but on who you believe them to be. And if you cannot truly connect with another person, if all relationships are built on incomplete versions of each other, then is anyone ever truly known? Or are we all simply alone, pretending that we are not? The boredom of an immortal mind. You fear death, but have you ever considered the alternative? Imagine living forever. Not just for centuries, but for eternity. At first, it might seem like a gift, unlimited time, endless experiences. But eventually you would run out of things to do. Every book would be read, every song would be heard, every place would be visited, every pleasure exhausted. The thrill of discovery would fade, the joy of learning would become meaningless. You would have seen it all. Now imagine time stretching forward endlessly. Trillions of years, the Earth gone, the stars burned out, the universe growing colder, emptier, darker, and still you remain, with no more stories to tell, no more moments of surprise, no more reason to exist. Death is terrifying because it is unknown, but what if the real horror is never being allowed to die?
What if the worst possible fate is not nothingness,
but everything forever? The crushing weight of an infinite universe. You are small. No, smaller than that. You live on a planet that is nothing more than a speck in a galaxy of billions of stars, in a universe filled with trillions more. You are surrounded by an immensity that will never acknowledge your existence. The universe does not care if you suffer. It does not care if you thrive. It does not care if you live or die. You will never travel beyond this tiny world. You will never see the vast, unreachable expanse that stretches in all directions. Even if humanity survives for millions of years, even if we spread across galaxies, we will still be nothing compared to the endless void. Your entire life, every moment of meaning you have ever experienced, is happening inside a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the universe, a dust mote floating in an abyss so large your mind cannot even comprehend it. And when you die, nothing will change. The stars will burn on, the galaxies will drift apart, and the universe will continue expanding, cold, endless, and silent. If that does not terrify you, you have not thought about it hard enough. The horror of unfinished thoughts. You are about to remember something, a name, a memory, an idea. But just as it surfaces, it's gone.
Where did it go?
Your mind is not a perfect machine. It forgets. It misfires. It leaves gaps, holes, moments that slip away without warning. But what if you are forgetting more than you realize? What if your mind is constantly losing pieces of itself, entire thoughts, entire experiences vanishing without a trace? What if somewhere deep inside your brain you already know something important, something horrifying, something world-shattering, but you simply cannot remember it?
Now consider this. If a thought disappears before it can be fully formed, did it ever exist at all? And what if the most important realization you could ever have, the answer to the question that haunts you, the thing that would explain everything, has already been forgotten?
The incompleteness of the self. You think you are whole, that you are one person, a complete individual with a singular identity. But the truth is you are missing something. There is a part of you that was lost before you were even aware of it. Maybe it was taken by time, forgotten memories, past versions of yourself that no longer exist. Maybe it was shaped by the expectations of others, parts of you that were discarded to fit into the world. Or maybe there was never a whole self to begin with. Philosophers like Jacques Lacan and Friedrich Nietzsche argued that the self is a fragmented illusion, a mask you wear, constructed from experiences, fears, and contradictions. You seek to define yourself, but every attempt only reveals more gaps. The moment you think you know who you are, you change. If the self is incomplete, then what does that mean? Are you a puzzle with missing pieces? Or are you a collection of pieces that were never meant to fit together at all? And if you are not whole, if you never were, then who is it that is thinking right now? The paradox of the observer. You watch the world, you analyze, you reflect, you try to understand, but have you ever questioned what it means to be the observer? Quantum physics suggests that observation changes reality, that a particle behaves differently when it is being measured. This idea has led philosophers to ask, if observing something alters it, then what happens when you observe yourself? The moment you look inward, something shifts. You are not just thinking, you are watching yourself think. But who then is the real you? The thinker or the watcher? If every thought is observed, then is it ever truly yours? If self-awareness is just an endless loop of watching yourself, then where does it end? And worse, who is watching you right now as you read this? The lie of self-improvement. You tell yourself you can change, that you can become better, stronger, wiser, that if you just work hard enough, learn enough, struggle enough, you will reach a state of true self-improvement. But what if that's a lie?
Every change you make is temporary. You build habits only to break them. You evolve only to relapse into old patterns. You gain knowledge only to forget. The things that once mattered to you fade, and the things you strive for now will someday seem meaningless. Nietzsche warned of the eternal recurrence, the idea that we are doomed to repeat the same patterns over and over again without escape. You think you are growing, but maybe you are just cycling through the same illusions, believing in progress when all you are doing is moving in circles.
If self-improvement is endless, if there is no final version of you that is complete, then what are you actually chasing? And if you can never truly fix yourself, were you ever broken to begin with? The burden of infinite choice. You believe that having choices is good, that the more options you have, the more control you have over your life. But what if too many choices is worse than none at all? Philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Barry Schwartz have argued that choice is a prison, a source of endless anxiety because every decision you make eliminates an infinite number of other possibilities. When you choose one path, you are simultaneously killing every other path you could have taken. Now imagine a life where every possible outcome is available to you. Every career, every relationship, every version of yourself. How could you ever choose? How could you ever be certain that you picked the right path when so many others are forever lost to you? And what if, no matter what you choose, you will always wonder, what if I had chosen differently? The tragic inevitability of violence. You like to believe that we are civilized, that humanity has moved beyond its brutal past, that violence is something we have overcome. But history says otherwise. For thousands of years, humans have killed each other over resources, over power, over ideas. Wars end only for new wars to begin. Societies promise peace only to collapse into bloodshed. The philosopher Thomas Hobbes argued that the state of nature, humanity's true primal existence, is one of chaos and brutality. We do not create violence, we are born from it. And here is the worst part. Even if you reject violence, it does not reject you. You live under governments that wage wars. You walk streets where harm can strike at any moment. You are part of a species that, no matter how much it tries to evolve, always finds its way back to the blade, the bullet, the bomb. Maybe peace is not the natural state of humanity. Maybe violence is.
Maybe all of civilization is just a pause between inevitable cycles of destruction. And maybe when the next one begins, you will finally see the truth.
We were never meant to be anything else. The indifference of the future. You assume the future is waiting for you, that it is something you are moving toward, something that will eventually arrive, but the future does not care. It does not know you exist. Time moves forward whether you are here or not. The world will continue without you. Civilizations will rise and fall. New generations will be born. And the things that feel important now will become meaningless fragments in history. The future does not promise you anything, not success, not happiness, not even survival. Think of the billions who have lived before you, their hopes, their fears, their struggles, all erased by time. The future took everything from them, and it will do the same to you. You tell yourself that you are building something that will last, that your actions matter, that you will be remembered.
But what if the future is not just indifferent? What if it is a graveyard burying everything that came before it? And what if one day it buries you too, so completely that it will be as if you never existed at all?
The death of the first-person perspective. You have only ever seen the world through your eyes. You have only ever lived in your mind. The concept of I is the foundation of your existence, the one thing you know with certainty. But what if it is an illusion? Philosophers and neuroscientists have questioned whether the first-person perspective is real at all. Your sense of self is a construct built from fragmented experiences and stitched together by memory. The you that existed 10 years ago is already gone, replaced by something slightly different. If your identity changes, evolves, even vanishes when you sleep, then what part of you remains the same? Some theories suggest that consciousness is just a side effect, an echo of neurological processes, not something fundamental or stable. If that is true, then the I that you hold on to so desperately may not truly exist at all. If the first-person perspective is an illusion, then what happens when it dies? And worse, what if it already has? The unknowability of one's own mind. You assume you understand yourself, that your thoughts belong to you, that your emotions make sense, that your mind is something you can trust. But what if it isn't? There are thoughts inside you that you do not control, desires you cannot explain, fears you cannot rationalize, entire parts of your mind hidden from you, buried in the unconscious, shaping your decisions in ways you will never fully understand. The philosopher Sigmund Freud argued that the conscious mind is just a thin layer, floating above a vast, unknowable abyss of repressed thoughts and instincts. If that is true, then the mind is not one thing. It is a battlefield, a war between forces you cannot see, fighting for control over you. Now ask yourself, if your mind isn't fully yours, if you do not understand where your own thoughts come from, then who is really thinking? The horror of the absent God. For most of human history, we believed that someone was watching, that there was an order to the universe, a plan, a presence that cared about us. But what if there isn't? The philosopher Nietzsche warned that God is dead, that modernity had stripped away the old beliefs, leaving humanity alone in an indifferent cosmos. Without God, there is no divine justice, no ultimate meaning, no guiding hand ensuring that suffering will be redeemed. You are alone in an empty, silent universe where prayers go unanswered, where suffering happens for no reason, where morality is not divine but simply a human invention. You tell yourself that maybe God exists but is simply hidden, that maybe there is a plan even if you do not see it. But what if there is no plan? What if the silence is not a test, but the truth? And what if you have been talking to no one this whole time? The tyranny of meaninglessness. You assume that life has meaning, or at least that you can create meaning for yourself. But what if meaning itself is just another illusion? Existentialist philosophers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus argued that life is fundamentally absurd, that we are creatures desperate for meaning in a universe that offers none. We build societies, tell stories, invent gods and morals, all to avoid the terrifying reality. Nothing matters. You can achieve everything you desire. You can love, create, explore. But in the end, it will all disappear. The world will forget. The universe will erase every trace of you. And if nothing lasts, if no action carries permanent weight, then what does it mean to exist? Worse, if you try to reject meaning, if you say nothing matters, then why do you keep going? If meaninglessness is the truth, then why do you still try?
Maybe meaning is not something you find.
Maybe it is a prison you cannot escape, the infinite mirror of identity. You think you know who you are, but when you try to define yourself, the answer keeps changing. Who are you? Are you your past, your thoughts, your body? If you could strip everything away, what remains? Philosophers like Derek Parfit and David Hume argued that there is no core self, only a series of shifting reflections, an identity that changes depending on when and how you look at it. If you are always changing, then is there any real you at all? Now imagine a mirror reflecting another mirror, stretching infinitely into the distance. You see an image, but there is no original, just copies of copies, reflections of something that does not exist. If you are nothing more than a reflection, a story, you tell yourself to feel real, then who is looking back at you? And what happens if the reflection stops recognizing you? The quiet horror of time moving forward. You have no control over it. Time does not wait for you. It does not pause when you are overwhelmed, does not rewind when you make a mistake, does not slow down when you wish it would. You can beg, you can scream, you can hold on to the past with everything you have, but it will keep moving forward. Think of the person you were 10 years ago. That version of you is gone, not changed, not evolved, erased, overwritten by something new. And the version of you now? It too will disappear. One moment you are young, certain there is time left. The next you are older, looking back at memories that feel closer than they should. You never really notice it happening. Time does not announce itself, it simply takes. And one day you will look around and realize that the people you love are gone, that the world is not the same, that you are no longer the person you thought you would always be. And the worst part? There is no way back. No way to reclaim what was lost. No way to stop the slow, quiet, inevitable movement toward the last day you will ever experience. The absence of objective reality. You assume the world around you is real, that objects exist independently of you, that time flows consistently, that truth is something that can be known. But what if none of that is true? The philosopher Immanuel Kant argued that we do not experience reality as it actually is. We only experience a version of it shaped by our minds. Modern physics suggests that time is not absolute, that space bends, that even particles do not behave in fixed ways when unobserved. If reality is shaped by perception, then how do you know it exists when you are not looking? How do you know that the world is still there when you sleep, that your memories are real, that your entire life is not just an illusion, a dream you cannot wake from. And if nothing is truly objective,
Then how do you know anything at all?
the mistaken assumption of a past. You remember yesterday. You remember your childhood. You remember the things that have happened to you.
But what if you don't?
What if your memories are just stories, fabrications created by your mind to make sense of the world? Memory is not a recording. It is a reconstruction, pieced together every time you recall it. Every time you think about the past, you are altering it, shaping it, erasing details, adding new ones without realizing it. If that is true, then how much of your past is real? If memories can be rewritten, how do you know they were ever true in the first place? What if you are not remembering what happened, but only what your mind needs you to believe? Now ask yourself, what if your past never actually happened? What if the person you think you were
Never existed at all?
the betrayal of memory? You trust your mind to hold on to the things that matter, the faces of loved ones, the most important moments of your life, the lessons you have learned.
But memory does not care about you. It fades. It warps. It replaces details with lies, rewriting your past without your permission. You have already forgotten more than you remember, lost entire conversations, entire days, entire versions of yourself.
One day you will reach for a memory and find that it is gone, not just blurred, but erased, as if it was never there. One day the faces of people you love will become indistinct. One day you will struggle to remember what it felt like to be young. And if memory is what makes you who you are, if your past is what defines you, then what happens when it disappears? What happens when you wake up one morning and realize that the person you once were has already died, not in body, but in mind? And what if you never even noticed the slow erosion of what matters? Nothing is lost all at once. The things that matter to you, your passions, your friendships, your purpose, do not disappear in an instant. They fade gradually, so slowly that you do not notice. One day you wake up and realize that the fire you once had is gone. The dreams that once consumed you feel distant, unimportant. The people you loved have drifted, not because of tragedy, but because of time. This is how loss truly works, not through sudden catastrophe, but through erosion. A slow wearing down of everything you thought was permanent. You tell yourself you will fight it, that you will hold on, but life does not let you. The world changes, you change, and by the time you realize that something is missing, that something has been lost, it is already too late. What if right now something you care about is fading? What if, in a year, in a decade, you look back at yourself and grieve for the things you didn't realize were slipping away? And what if the most terrifying part is not the loss itself, but the fact that you never saw it happening? The vanishing of the familiar. You assume that the world will stay the same, that the places you know will always be there, that the people you love will always remain a part of your life. But familiarity is fragile. The house you grew up in may be torn down, the streets you walked as a child will change, people you once knew will become strangers, their voices unrecognizable, their faces fading from memory. The past does not wait for you. It moves on, reshaping itself until you no longer belong to it.
And then one day you return to a place that was once yours and realize that it is not yours anymore. The feeling of home is gone. The connections that once defined you have disintegrated. You have not only lost the place, you have lost the version of yourself that once lived there. Now imagine this. What if one day you wake up and everything you recognize is gone? The places, the people, the memories, all vanished, leaving you in a world that no longer feels like yours.
And what if, worse than being lost, you were the only one who noticed?
The absurdity of the final moment.
One day you will die. That is not speculation. It is not a possibility. It is certainty. You do not know when, you do not know how, but the moment will come. And when it does, what will it feel like? You spend your entire life preparing for things. You rehearse, you anticipate, you try to be ready. But death does not allow that. You do not get a moment to understand it, to process it. 1 second you are thinking, existing, feeling, and then you are not. Think of everything you have done, every experience you have had, every thought that has ever passed through your mind. In the end, it will all lead to nothing. A final instant that will arrive whether you are ready for it or not. And then, no applause, no closure. Just the sudden, absurd end of everything you ever were. The deepest suffering is silence. Pain can be screamed, fear can be voiced, even grief can be shared, carried between people. But true suffering is silent. When pain becomes too much, the voice disappears. There are no words for certain kinds of loneliness, no way to express despair so deep that even language feels meaningless. When suffering reaches its peak, it does not manifest in cries or wails. It vanishes into quiet nothingness. And this is the worst part. If pain is not spoken, then no one knows it exists. It festers in the mind, in the body, unseen, unheard. The world moves forward, unaware. You laugh, you smile, you say you are fine, because what else can you do?
But inside, there is silence.
And the longer it lasts, the more you realize no one is coming to break it. The spectre of eternal life. You fear death. You fear the unknown, the nothingness beyond it. But have you ever feared the alternative? Imagine that death is not real, that you never leave this world. At first, it may sound like a gift, more time, more experiences, but then the years begin to stretch. Decades pass, then centuries. You watch as civilizations crumble, as the world changes beyond recognition. You see the people you love age and die again and again while you remain. Eventually, you will have seen everything, done everything, lost everything. You will know the feeling of outliving entire histories, of watching the meaning of your existence dissolve. And still, you will wake up the next day. The universe will grow colder, the stars will burn out, and you will remain, drifting through an endless void with no end, no purpose, no escape. Maybe death is not the worst thing that can happen. Maybe the worst thing is that it never happens at all. The weight of forgotten histories. There were people before you, countless people. People who lived, fought, loved, suffered, and died. Some were remembered for a time. Most were not. Every civilization before yours was filled with minds like yours, minds that carried dreams, regrets, and unspoken thoughts. They had stories they wanted to tell, truths they needed to share. But time did not care. Their voices faded. Their names were buried. Their lives became nothing more than dust. Now think of yourself. You have memories, experiences, emotions that feel impossible to forget, but you will be forgotten too. No matter how much you accomplish, no matter how deeply you love, no matter how desperately you try to leave something behind, history does not keep records of ordinary lives, and the past is a graveyard of lost voices. How many stories have already vanished? How many truths have been erased? How much of reality itself has been rewritten, distorted, or simply forgotten.
And the worst part, the weight of all those lost histories is already pressing down on you, but you will never know what you have lost because it is already gone.
The fear of never having existed. You assume that you exist, that your life is real, that your experiences have meaning, that your thoughts belong to you.
But how do you know?
You cannot prove that your past is real. Your memories are unreliable, easily altered, easily erased. You cannot prove that your relationships are real. Every connection you have is filtered through perception, assumptions, misunderstandings. And what about your mind? You cannot point to it, cannot touch it, cannot define it beyond the thoughts it produces. If existence depends on perception, then what happens if no one remembers you? If your name is never spoken, if your image is erased, if your actions leave no mark? If no one can recall that you were ever here, then did you ever exist at all? And what if that has already happened? What if, in some forgotten version of time, you have already lived, already been erased, already been lost to oblivion?
What if right now, at this very moment, you are simply an echo of something that never was?
The indifference of time to suffering. You suffer. You feel pain, loss, grief. You experience heartbreak, despair, loneliness. These moments feel enormous, world-shattering. But time does not stop for them. No matter how deeply you hurt, the world moves on. No matter how unbearable the suffering, the clock keeps ticking. Your pain does not leave a mark on time. It does not slow down the days, does not alter the course of history. The universe will not acknowledge your suffering, and it will not wait for you to heal. Every tragedy eventually becomes a footnote. Every wound, no matter how deep, fades into the past. You are not the first to feel this way. You will not be the last. And in the end, all suffering, yours, mine, the suffering of all who have ever lived, will be forgotten. The universe does not care that you hurt. And that is what makes it hurt the most. The curse of incomplete knowledge. You seek answers. You want to know the truth, the meaning of life, the nature of reality, the reason for existence. But what if the worst fate is not ignorance, but incomplete knowledge? You learn a piece of the truth, but not all of it. You glimpse something in the darkness, but not enough to understand. You uncover a hidden pattern, but not enough to see the full picture. Every answer you find leads to more questions, deeper confusion, a sense that the most important part is still missing. Philosophers like Søren Kierkegaard warned that knowledge is a double-edged sword, that understanding without completion only brings dread. What if there is a final truth, but you are only allowed to see part of it? What if what you know is only a fragment of something much worse? And what if, in searching for truth, you doom yourself to a lifetime of realizing that the most important knowledge will always be just out of reach? Maybe ignorance is not the curse. Maybe the real curse is knowing that you will never know enough. The horror of the final thought. One day you will think your last thought. You do not know when it will happen. It could be years from now, or it could be tonight, as you close your eyes. It could be peaceful, or it could be a desperate realization that death is moments away. But when it happens, that is it. Your entire existence, every memory, every achievement, every love, every fear will lead to that one final moment of awareness. And then there will be nothing. No time to process it, no time to reflect, just an abrupt, irreversible cut to black. What will your final thought be? Will you be ready for it? Will you even realize that it is the last? Or will it be something small, something meaningless, something you never would have chosen as the last echo of your existence? Because when the final thought comes, you will have no control over what it is. And that should terrify you more than anything else. The paradox of the chosen fate. You believe you have free will. You believe that you can shape your destiny, make choices that determine the course of your life. But what if those choices are already part of a predetermined fate? The paradox lies in the tension between choice and destiny. You make decisions, you choose paths, you believe that you are in control of your own life. But what if your very act of choosing was always going to happen? What if the choices you think are free are just another part of the plan? A plan you will never escape, even if you try to defy it. Imagine this. What if everything you have ever done, everything you will ever do, was already written before you even had a chance to decide? What if fate isn't something you fight against, but something you unknowingly walk toward, one choice at a time? You may think you are choosing your fate, but what if fate is choosing you? The fear that no one remembers you. You live for connection. You build relationships, create memories, contribute to the world around you, all in the hope that when you are gone, someone will remember you. But what if no one does? One day, the people who know you will be gone. The world will forget your name, your face, your existence. Your impact on others, no matter how profound it seemed, will fade into oblivion. And in the end, you will have left no trace.
Some think it is enough to live for yourself, to be content in your own life. But what if the ultimate fear is not dying? It is dying without anyone noticing, without your life ever having mattered. What if, no matter how much you strive, no matter how many people you love, your life will vanish without a trace and the world will continue as if you never existed?
The end of personal narrative. You spend your life telling yourself a story. You are the protagonist, the hero, the center of your own universe. You have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You define yourself through the choices you make, the experiences you live through, the way you relate to others. But what if that narrative is nothing more than a lie? When you die, when your mind finally gives way to the inevitable end, what happens to your story? Does it end with you? Does the plot continue on without you? Or does it simply stop existing altogether? Think about this. You are the only one who can tell your story, and the only one who can remember it. When your mind fades, who will you be? Will you be someone who never existed at all? A character whose tale ends with nothing but blank pages? If your personal narrative dies with you, were you ever truly the author of your own story? The void between conscious moments. There are gaps in your consciousness, spaces where nothing happens. Your mind is always active, but it cannot always be aware of itself. Think of the moments between thoughts, between decisions, between actions. These brief moments where you exist but are not fully present. Every time you blink, every time your attention shifts, you enter into a temporary void. During these moments, you are not thinking, not perceiving, not aware of your surroundings. You are simply not here. But what happens in that void? If you are not aware of these moments, how do you know you exist during them? Is it possible that you do not truly experience the passage of time, but rather you are only aware of the spaces between time? And worse, what if the void between these moments is the truest part of you? What if this is what your existence truly is? A series of gaps, fleeting and forgotten, that define who you are more than anything else. The final question that has no answer. You live your life searching for meaning, for purpose, for truth. You ask questions, you seek answers, you hope that one day the puzzle will come together. But what if the final question has no answer? The question that haunts you, the one that everyone asks but no one can answer, is this: why am I here? Why does existence exist? Why do we live and die? Why does anything matter? Every answer you find only leads to more questions. Every attempt to understand existence ends in mystery, with nothing but the certainty that the truth is out of reach. Some people say it's love, others say it's faith, others say it's purpose, but no answer satisfies. And then one day you realize the question itself is unanswerable. There is no meaning, no reason, no divine plan. It is just an empty question, one that will remain unanswered forever. What if the ultimate truth is not the discovery of a final answer, but the realization that some questions are meant to remain unsolved?